how many sets per week should you be doing for muscle growth? Should it be 1? Should it be 10? Should it be 20? Should it be 50? Well, the reality is that, and this is a sort of honest answer that I don't think many people who are speaking in front of cameras are willing to give, which is that I don't know. And to be honest, you don't know. All that we can ultimately do is create a hypothesis on an individual basis, test the hypothesis, and then see what happened. But that's not super helpful in terms of directing people. So what I'm going to do in this video is kind of go a different direction than most people go. Like, I feel like a lot of people just start with the recommendations. Oh, here's what the research says. You can go find that on other channels. I'm not really interested in that. What I'm interested in is teaching you all how to think about this stuff and not to just blindly ask questions like how many sets should I do and then taking what I say as gospel. What my goal is for this video is to show you kind of my thought process in terms of why clearly all this works and what you might want to lean into based on your personal preference and personal tilt. So to do that, what I want to start with is just by talking about what people are actually arguing about when they argue about low volume, high volume. Because I don't think it's as obvious as just a number like 20 or like 1 or like 5. What I think it's ultimately an argument about is what a set actually is. What constitutes a set? Because people just talk about a set like it's one thing, right? But you and I know, and we've seen people in the gym, and maybe you're a trainer watching this or a coach and you are watching your clients and coaching your clients, a set can be right at the last rep, and a set can also be boop at the end of a set. We all know people who claim to be on the side of the spectrum when in reality that's what their last rep looks like. And that is going to be the primary focus of what we're going to talk about. So if we imagine two sides of the spectrum, high volume, low volume, okay? And again, people do more than 20 sets a week. I'm just putting an arbitrary cap on that. The low volume people, what do their sets generally look like? Again, assuming like an experienced trainee who has an accurate appraisal of what they're actually doing, which is not super common, mind you, especially on that end of the spectrum, but we'll talk about that. Well, these people use higher relative efforts, right? And by virtue of that, oops, what am I doing? Lower relative volumes, right? And these two things are inversely related, meaning that when one goes up, the other has to go down. A simple way to think about this is if I try super hard on all my sets, that's the end of my set, right? I can't even budge out of the bottom, that's my last set. By definition, you are not going to be able to sustain as much volume doing that kind of thing. Is that good or bad? Who knows? Depends on the context. And by the way, effort, we can just simply define as, if you've heard of it, reps in reserve. So if you finish a set and you have 0 reps in reserve, that means you have 0 reps left in the tank. You can't do another If you finish a set and you have 3 reps in reserve, you could have done theoretically 3 more. Now, as I mentioned earlier, people are really, in my experience, really terrible predictors of RIR. And a lot of the time when people think that they have 0 or 1 rep in reserve, they probably have 10 or 5. But that's kind of maybe for another time, that conversation. So as we move in this direction, the higher volume direction, what happens? Well, the volume obviously goes up. So what happens, right? The effort must go down. And guess what? If you try to do every set to failure, 20, 25, 30 sets, good luck. Good luck to you. Go and see what happens. And so this is ultimately what I think people are arguing about, right? Because clearly there are tons of people who do this, great results. Tons of people who do this, great results. The difference is, what kind of set do you like to do? Do you like to be someone that goes into the gym and says, you know what, I'm just gonna like fight my demons today. I'm gonna kill myself on every set. I like the feeling of torture, that's me. Or are you the kind of person that just likes to feel a sick pump? Maybe you don't like to feel the biggest of sweats. Maybe you have an injury history and maybe you're just a little bit more cautious, right? There's nothing wrong with either one of these approaches. So to answer the question of how many sets should you do, I have no clue. But the reality is that anything along the spectrum can work, and which of these styles you prefer should be based on your preference and how much you enjoy, right? Each training style. Again, are you someone who tilts in the direction of feeling like you need to train to failure? If so, great. You probably won't need as much volume of work per muscle group per week. Are you someone who just likes to feel a sick pump and you like to walk around, look at yourself in the mirror? Great. You don't need as much effort per set, but as a consequence of that, you do more volume. So if you lean toward this end of the spectrum, just understand that this is the relationship that must occur. It's not like it's really an option, right? In other words, if you do every set to failure or beyond failure, right, whatever you think that means, you're not going to be able to sustain 20 plus sets per week of a muscle group. Like, you're just not. You're at some point, it's very difficult to make predictions, especially when you're trying to like think scientifically. But pretty much every time that anyone has tried to do this for like high efforts and high volumes, right, bad stuff tends to happen. If it's not now, if it's not in a couple months, it's probably eventually, right? You just run yourself into the ground. What is the number one thing that prevents bodybuilders from continuing to progress? Injury, right? They're doing too much, okay? But anyhow, the goal of this video wasn't to say, maybe some of you are frustrated by it, oh, you should do 15 sets, you should do 5 sets. The goal was not to give you an answer. The goal was to try to get you to think about what you think. Because oftentimes this conversation just goes in the direction of someone standing in front of a camera and being like, here's the magic number, do that magic number, right? And that's, who's that helping? Like, who's that actually giving agency to? And one of the goals, if any of you have been watching a lot of these whiteboard videos of this channel, is not just to teach you what to think, but to teach you how. And so here's my sort of teaching you how to think about this. Think about it as a spectrum. And guess what? The beauty of this, the beauty, is that you don't have to apply either one of these methods to every group. For example, you might want to do this thing for delts for whatever reason. You might want to do this thing for biceps. You might want to do this thing for quads. You might want to do this thing for glutes, right? Whatever it happens to be, you don't have to sort of subscribe to a single method as if all muscle groups are the same, both in terms of their anatomy and their structure and how we can train them, but then also in terms of their priority. So does it make sense for you to do high volumes of a muscle group and, medium to low efforts of that muscle group if it's not a priority? Should you be doing 20 sets of biceps if your arms are already a strong point? Ultimately, again, it comes back to you. So I hope this was helpful in terms of an exercise of how to think and not just what to think. And I'm curious as to what all of your experiences are. Please, like, if you're watching still at this point, great, thank you, appreciate you. Leave a comment about your experience with this, because I can almost with high confidence guarantee that some people will comment on this video, their experience of, man, I really just enjoyed this and I saw so much better results from this. And other people will be like, man, this is the only thing that really ever worked for me. This over here always felt like crap. So just understand that, and just understand that anyone who tries to give you the answer, is probably trying to sell you on something, whether it's their own authority or some kind of program. And I'm not here to sell you any program other than my ebook. Have you seen my ebook? It has nothing to do with volume, but has to do with how to target any muscle in the body. Link is in the description below.